Hey everyone, welcome. I am going to just do a little demo here. I guess it's a video tutorial. It's still a demonstration of this little red squirrel here from the Sharing Squirrels pattern in my book, Animal Embroidery Workbook. So I'm going to be referring to my instructions. I wrote this over a year ago, so let's hope I remember how to stitch some squirrels. So we're going to be using 2 strands of floss for most stitches here. I will let you know when we have any changes. So I'm starting with some black. I'm going to do the eye first. So the eye is just, let's see, it's padded satin stitch. So what I'm basically, the easiest way to do padded satin stitch is to do 2 layers of satin stitch. But if you want to pad with something else, you can. If you want to do the initial fill with, I don't know, backstitch. You can do an outline. Actually, I think I'm going to do that. I'm just going to do a couple stitches inside, and then I'm going to do an outline. And then I'll fill with my top layer of satin. So for my outline, I think I'll do backstitch just because it's an easy stitch. So what this outline does is it kind of helps define our shape, which is important for this piece in particular because of all of the long and short stitches for the fur. Sometimes they can build up and you can lose details like an eye. What I used to do was I would stitch like the eyes and the nose last, like on top of the fur. And then sometimes I like doing it like this instead. Neither is wrong. Neither is the right way. The right way is the way that works for you, right? All right, so there's my outline. Whoa, there we go. And then I am going to just do, so that was my padding and my outline, and now I'm doing the satin stitch on top. And again, there's probably 100 different ways to do that. Oops. You can outline with different stitch. You can fill that initial layer with a different stitch. Oh my. I keep losing my needle. It's just popping out of my hand. So I sometimes worry that the instructions on that are kind of vague, but like, I mean, you can do it exactly like I do, so I try to include that, but if you want to do it different, that works too. Okay, there's an eye. So I am going to move this floss out of the way. Next, we're going to fill the face with long and short stitch. We're going to start at the nose. So I'm actually going to go to the lightest color and start our nose. So the stitch direction is like away. Actually, I could grab a pen. Well, I didn't plan very well, guys. Stitch direction is gonna go away from the head. That's one thing you can do, is mark stitch direction before you get started. Or you can mark stitch direction with your stitches, which is kind of what I do. Oh my. Sometimes I get stuck on my hoop stand. If you want, you could do this entire piece with a single strand of floss. It's going to give you a much more delicate, detailed look. I'm using 2 strands because it saves some time. And I'm okay with them being a little bit scruffier, especially when we get to the tails. So you could potentially call those first couple of stitches my guidelines. And I'm just going to get in here and fill the in-between spaces. I'm splitting these stitches when I can already. Those first guideline stitches were essentially my first row of long and short stitch. So I'm back at the top and I'm then filling in those spaces. I guess that's what long and short stitch is. It's just a series of filling in the spaces. And how do I decide where to stitch next? It's just, I don't know, habit. Sorry, that's the tail of this floss I just poked through on accident. There we go. And actually I can feel my black floss is all tangled back there, so I just needed to snip that away real quick. We are going to use it again just for the details on the nose, but I will re-anchor then. So I just try to grow the shape evenly, I guess. And wherever my eye catches a little empty spot, I go in and fill. So we're gonna move to the chin here with this color. And on the chin, I'll show you the diagram here. Dun, 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 dun. You can see I outlined here in the pink, that means padding. So what we want to do is, like why did I choose these areas for the padding? So basically it's to add dimension. So we want, actually the chin is going to go back and the arm is going forward, so I actually don't need to worry about the padding yet. So sorry, that was a little premature, but I'll keep talking about it. So the padding helps us like see more three-dimension, right? So I wanted to make sure that this foot shows up in front of this foot, so we have a little dimension here, right, etc., all along here. And then same with what's going on the tail, and then sooner we'll get into just this spot here where we're gonna add a little padding. But so since I'm on the other side of the padding for the chin, I don't need to do a thing. I'm just gonna fill this in. Our cute little light colored chin. We could even go lighter if you wanted to find maybe an off-white. If you take a look at these little red squirrels, they do come in some different colors. Okay. Oops, sorry, I kind of moved my camera there. Very professional, huh? Right, and I think I might do just a couple more around the eye. We're going to come back with a light gray around the eye. But I just feel the need to come in here too. And you'll notice this does not look good. And that is okay. That's like the #1 rule of thread painting. It is not gonna look good at first. It's gonna look bad. It's gonna look weird. All right, now I'm gonna move on to my medium red, which is what we're gonna use a lot of. And I'm gonna keep filling the head. Oh, and I forgot, I did want to add like a teeny bit of this at the nose. Oops. I'll actually come back to add it after I do that nose detail. It wouldn't be wrong either way. That's another thing about thread painting, like there's really no wrong way, I don't think. Just get in there. So when I transition to a color, I want to make sure I'm not coming up in a total straight line across, right? So I have some stitches that are below and some stitches that are above, and that helps us with that blending. And also what I did with this one is when I was done, I went back with a single strand of floss in case there was any rough spots that I felt I needed to come back. All right, so now that I'm up here, while I'm here, I'm gonna go ahead and do my outline. So I'm just gonna do kind of just refocus to an actual split stitch outline to create that padding, that slightly raised piece here where my head is above that back ear, and then also this ear pops out in front. Okay, so that's all that I'm talking about when I have that magenta line on the stitch direction key. It's just doing a little outline. So I'm gonna come back and fill this in. And like, I guess you could do that with any color if you then go ahead and cover it with your long and short stitches. In this case, it's just, you know, it's easier to just use the color that I'm gonna cover it with and do it right when I'm about to cover it. If you want, you could always do all those outlines first, just so that you don't have to pause your thread painting. Alright, my stitch direction needs to turn to the right here. So I'm going to start kind of moving in that direction with these guys. It's your little diagonal. I'm using this is a size 9 needle, I think. It might be 10 even, which is a little tight, but it works. But if that's too small, you can definitely use something bigger. Obviously, the smaller your needle, the more accuracy you're going to have here, and you're not going to make as big of holes in your fabric. So you can see now my stitches have rotated, right? I started off vertical and I'm horizontal as I go around this shape. And that was just a little process, right? And there's some overlap there. There's some areas that are thicker than this area is like thinner, and I'm okay with that. You'd probably see less of that if you were doing a single strand of floss. So the center my ear is going to be a darker color. So I should probably stop and do the ears. Not stop, but just kind of change my direction. So for the ears, the stitch direction is like up and down. So kind of just like that. So what I did on my sample, I guess I used a couple more stitches than that. I'm gonna go over this little section where we did that padding. So later I'll fill that with that darker red next time I use it. And I'll fill this back ear. Make sure you go down and kind of tuck under these stitches, right? So it looks like it's behind. I feel like I have a little bit of my guidelines showing I need to cover. This is the fabric that's in the kit, the color printed. All right, and then I'm gonna come up and do a couple of straight stitches for these ear tufts. I don't know if you go stop what you're doing and go look at a picture of red squirrels. We don't have red squirrels where I live, but gosh, they're so cute with their ear tufts. Cool. All right, I'm just gonna keep moving along here. I think here I'm actually going to do my stitches like backwards so that I can stitch right up to my eye rather than trying to come up. I'm afraid if I come up right next to my eye, I'm going to pull some of that black out with it. So I'm just going to go down at the eye. Hopefully help it stand out more. Okay. That's good. So I'm just going to keep going here. Kind of working away from the head. And then once we get to the arm, we kind of have a tricky stitch direction change and some padding that I will demo. Stitch. Whoops, there's the back of that black. So slowly, you just keep chipping at it, right? Keep filling in those gaps. All right, so I worked a little bit more on this medium colored fur, and I'm going to come in. You can see how I've been changing my stitch direction around the corner here. Just want to do this edge. So before I showed you how to do an official outline and then come in and do your long and short stitch fur over that outline. So here's kind of a more loose, less structured way to do that, is to just come in, do your stitches, and then basically I'm just going to do another layer of stitches on top to create that depth. Oops. So here I'm adding a little bit extra. Also, it's up to you, like, you could stitch the body and then the tail and then come back and do the tummy and arms and legs. You could do that arm before coming and doing this part of the tummy and leg. I really don't think that there's a wrong way. Just keep stitching, really. Fill in those gaps. Just keep an eye. Oops, I've definitely just stitched the back of my fabric. All right, that was a risky cut. Okay, I did cut my floss. All right. Now I have a chunk of fabric back there. Like I said, I am definitely a professional. I usually do not use a clamp when I stitch because I really clearly need to be able to see what's going on behind what I'm doing here. I need to see what's going on in the back. So maybe another question you would have is why do the front pieces first? And really, either way is fine. If you want to do the back leg first and like when we did the ear, if you want to do the ear in the back first and then come back and do that front stuff with the padding, that's absolutely okay to do. And I've definitely done it that way before. So again, I hope you don't think I'm being vague when I give my directions, because really there's a lot of different ways to do this. So here I'm actually, remember before I was coming up through stitches? Wow, I haven't been doing that these last couple stitches, huh? Nothing horrible happened, did it? So I don't think you should worry about that either. In theory, if you come up through the stitches rather than going down, like you split your stitches up, the transition should be smoother. Okay, so here's kind of a funky stitch direction situation too, where we have these vertical stitches kind of running into these horizontal stitches. Alright, so I think what I want to do, now that I have this done, I wanted to come in here. I'm going to do this arm so we can work this kind of stitch direction change, and then do this shadow on here. So really you could start from here and go up, or start from here and go down. I really don't know if one way is better than the other. And actually, let me change my mind. I'm going to move on to the dark color first. We'll do that. And the reason being, it really doesn't matter, but this way we can kind of do this edge. Oh my, I should have trimmed that, huh? I put a teeny tiny bit of this dark red here, and that's just so that there's a little bit more of a contrast between the chin here. So I'm just going to do like 2 split stitches, and that just creates a teeny little shadow under our chin. Alright, and then I'll go back down here. So as far as the edge of our squirrel, we can make a nice, neat, sharp edge. Or not, right? Because it's furry, so we obviously don't want it too wild. Like once we get to the tail, then we can get nice and wild. But we don't want to be too wild down here or we'll lose our shapes. So I guess when I do thread painting, I do a mix of stitching sections as I go and then stitching things that are convenient because that's what color I have on my needle. So I'm going to sneak up and fill in this ear. Remember, we didn't do that. It's essentially going to be filled with satin stitch in here. I don't think I called it satin stitch, but we have such a tiny space. There's not really room for actually splitting your strands. So one thing I can do when I'm done is come back and, I was talking about coming back with the single strand of floss and kind of adding some individual strands of fur that would overlap there, make make it look more realistic. All right, so now I'm gonna jump down to the bottom. Since I still have this floss color, I'm just gonna fill in this foot really quick. I guess we should do it from this side. It's nice and quiet today. No cats are bugging me. The garbage guy that already came this morning. No work being done on the house. I can actually hear the clock ticking. Okay, there's that foot. So I'm gonna go back to my medium red and head back up. Let's see if we can finish this little arm. I'll probably finish this arm and do the tummy for you, and then I'll probably do the rest of the body offline, and then come back to show you a highlight on the body and the shadow on the body, and then we'll do the tail for sure. So it's kind of a cool project because you can practice having more measured and controlled long and short stitch for this fur on the body, and then just going wild on the tail. It's the same stitch, just executed in a slightly different way. It's funny, I'm looking at my original sample hoop, and it was a lot messier. Hopefully that's the right word to use. The fur is a little bit more erratic. There's more texture, and I'm gonna say that the reason is because there wasn't a pattern when I made it, right? I was making it up as I went, and so I'm not one to cut out stitches unless something's gone very wrong. So you can see all my little, basically you can see the sketch. It's more of a sketch, right? And more of a kind of feeling it out as I was going. This time I have directions. I know where the colors are gonna go. I know the stitch directions. I can kind of plan a little bit better. But not that one's better than the other. The first one's probably gonna have more personality. That's usually what happens with these. It's when I repeat them and like follow the instructions, all of a sudden they become more formal. So if while you're doing this, you might want to look at a picture of a real squirrel, or if you have a squirrel. Oh, you know what we should do? We should do that little stitch on the nose. Probably makes more sense to do it after I do the black, but there we go. Just to add a little color there. I'm going to come back and outline that with black, so it'll make a little more sense, hopefully. So here, I don't know, this is kind of magically blending on its own into these stitches. I'm glad I didn't start at this end now that I'm here, because I probably wouldn't have made such a natural transition. Excellent. Probably get one more stitch right here. Cool. Alright, now I'm gonna grab my lightest color. I come from here. I'm stitching back towards these stitches again to kind of try to tuck them under. Those padded stitches or double layer of stitches, however you want to think of that. I just feel like I have more control when I go down versus up through my fabric. Okay, and I'm going to fill the gaps. I bet everybody that does a squirrel will do it in a slightly different order. I could do this squirrel 100 times and do it in a slightly different order every time. So please don't think that you're doing it wrong. And I feel like, yeah, I'm kind of doing a different stitch direction too on this little section. It's supposed to follow the body more. But nothing bad happened. So again, I might come back and at the end when I'm doing the details and make sure that this is really clear that this is on top. So I may come back and even do another layer on top. So we will talk about that then. All right, so you can see I worked on my squirrel here a bit more. I just want to show you how I can add padding here after I've actually stitched the area. Basically, I'm just going to come in and add an extra layer of stitches on top of these stitches. And this just adds a tiny bit more three-dimensionality. For something like this where it's fuzzy, I want texture, I think it's perfectly, whoa, I'm having a tangle party here. I just smacked into my pin cushion. All right. So where I'm okay with texture, right? I'm trying to create the texture first, so it's okay if I add more fur. I think it's okay to do it like this. Alternatively, you would, do your outline and then put these stitches on top. So just like that, and you could add more, even if you wanted it to look more three-dimensional. Okay. So I think I'm actually going to move on to my dark color so we can start kind of working on the tail. I'm just going to put in some stitches down here. I didn't fill this in all the way. Whoops. I also didn't put a knot at the end of that strand. There we go. So in theory, you should probably finish the squirrel body before moving on to the tail. Not quite sure why I didn't. I'll go back and fill it in later, but you can actually see some of my guiding stitches here. I was stitching and I was like, oh shoot, I need to kind of change this stitch direction. So I put those stitches in so I could work towards matching up the direction as I worked my way over there. So you could do that with your stitches like I did, or you could use a pen. It's going to get covered, so any pen or pencil. I like to use the disappearing ink for that, but honestly it doesn't matter because it's going to get covered with your stitches. You could use a fluorescent pink Sharpie. I don't know why you would, but you could. Okay, so now we're starting to get in the tail. So this is kind of cool because we get to see how we can use the same stitch to create different looking fur. We can see the main difference is my stitch length almost doubled. And I am just going to keep going. I'm just going to do what we did to fill the squirrel. Same thing with the tail, but I am just making these stitches bigger. I am going to make them a bit more irregular. I have not done that yet. It's going to happen. It's always a little scary because it looks weird, right? When you make it really irregular, like here. Oh, oops. I went outside the line. But it's okay. If you need some inspiration, you can always look at a picture of a squirrel's tail. I mean, they are just, gosh, they're fuzzy. They're so fuzzy, so fluffy. So be inspired by that. So if you like, once you kind of finish this little shadow down here, you can go straight to the next color. But what I'm actually going to do is work all the dark first. And that's what I say to do in the book. Like it's really up to you. You can kind of, you know, work your way along the tail and, you know, change colors as needed. For me, I really just like to keep the color on my needle. Although sometimes I get bored and change my mind. But one thing, like for this one, I like to do all the dark, then do all the light, and then the rest is easy, right? Because everything else is just that medium red. You've already done all the thinking. So this edge here, where the back of the squirrel meets the tail, I actually want the body to look a bit more in front. I want to work this up, right? Now, is it bad that I'm doing the tail first? Is it good that I'm telling the tail first? You know, I really can't tell you because I do it both ways. It might be that you prefer one way over the other. So do it that way. I do a little back and forth, I think. Like I did over here, right? I came back and added more dimension after. That's okay. See a little hole here. With the longer stitches, it's sometimes you get some weird holes. Just go back and fill them in. And with this style of thread painting, like I'm not so worried about having those perfect rows of long and short stitches that, you know, you have that perfect splitting of the previous row stitch. Nah. Just get in there. Fill those spaces. I thought maybe I had a hole right here. I can't really tell, but I'm going to fill it in because I at least see a depression here. See? And I even did that in the technically wrong direction, you know. All these other ones are going from the bottom up. still have more of the dark and the light I need to do, but I just wanted to show you what it kind of looks like once you start filling in here. So what I think is useful is doing those stitches to kind of help you figure out what your stitch direction is going to be. Because down the center, it's kind of just straight down the center. And of course you can wait to do this till you're all the way done with the other colors, or if you get bored like me, or you don't want to film the entire process, you can do it earlier. So something like this. So I'm going to start coming in here. Basically, this color is used to blend between the other two. So you definitely want overlap. Like this section that's all dark, look at this. I'm going to come in here, I'm going to add like a crazy stitch right there. Right there. Down here even. These should probably even be longer. I'm being kind of conservative. But just get in there and fill. Same on this side. And what I would suggest doing is, coming in, doing the darks, doing the lights, coming in, filling in with this medium color, and then going back, grab another strand of the dark and put it on top of some of this medium color to kind of add even more blending. And, the crazier we make these, the bigger we make them, the more fluffy our tail's going to be. You know what? If you do one and it's like, oh my gosh, I don't either like that, where that color is, or I don't like how long that stitch is, or I don't like what angle I chose for that stitch, guess what? Just cover it with more stitches. It's okay. The more stitches, the better here, really. Alright, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to fill more on the tail, and then I'll meet you back to show you, I guess I'll do the back of the squirrel, and then we'll do the details on the face. That's it. Okay, I have filled in this tail pretty much with that medium red. I'm coming back in with my light red just to show you this edge real quick. And adding this color here just kind of helps differentiate the back of the squirrel from the tail. And you can pat it by adding 2 layers. You can pat it by actually doing a split stitch outline first. Whatever works for you. or you can leave it unpadded. It looks like mine's not really padded, and I mean, you know, the point of the padding is to help differentiate between the shapes, and I don't know, I'm kind of just okay with how this looks like that, so I might just leave it. I do want to point out some of these crazy angles, and you know, those crazy angles are helping this tail look more realistic. I'm gonna come back in here because I want this to be kind of above this back shape here. So I'm gonna come in and add a couple big crazy stitches on top. I want you to know that I was working on the tail, and you know, you saw what it looked like when you last saw me, and I was like, oh my gosh, this doesn't look right. This doesn't look like my other one. How am I going to pull this off? Like, what am I doing different? And it looks fine now. So if you're having that feeling, if you're looking at yours and you're like, why doesn't it look like Jessica's? For me, it was like I was just not done. I had to come in and add more stitches, and now it's like, oh, it looks fine now. So these are like the highlights. And you can, I mean, you could keep going and going and going. Like, I'm almost at the end of my thread, so I'm probably just gonna stop there. But you can see I'm just like kind of coming in and helping blend, adding more interest here with different lengths, different directions. You know, sticking to the guidelines of the color, but adding some surprises, like that one right there, right? That's a little surprise. And let's see, let me do maybe another one here. Like that. I'll do something here. And we'll call that my last stitch. Okay, that one was like a big surprise, but I'm leaving it. Okay, so just to finish up, I'm just gonna add a couple stitches for the nose here. I just did like 2 straight stitches. So I'm gonna do one. Oops. I have a lot of stitches back there. One here. And just one here. I'm using 2 strands. I feel like this would also look good with just a single strand. That just gives us a little definition on the nose. And then to finish up, I have a tiny bit of this light gray, and I am going to outline this eye, and what that's going to do is help it stand out. I just have a single strand on here, doing split stitch. Oops. That one was a bit more of a back stitch than a split stitch. just like that. And then I'm going to add a little highlight here. When you do this highlight, don't pull too tight because it's going to kind of pull down into the stitches below. So you want it just like that. Okay, that's it. So it's up to you. You know, I think in the instructions I say to go back in with a single strand and do more blending if you want, but I think I'm happy with how it looks. You can see the previous one. There's differences and similarities. It's kind of interesting to see how I stitched it a little bit different despite it being the same stitcher and the same pattern. So yours probably won't look just like mine either, right? Like I can't even replicate it. So, okay, have fun. If you have questions, please send me email. I'm happy to help.